Hello and welcome to Morning Brew on Labour Social. It is Monday, June the 5th, 2023. A big shout out to everyone in the chat there. We've got Stephanie, we've got Johnny, we've got the Great British Game, we've got City Life, we've got Howlin' Mad Murdoch, we've got Lucy Willis, we've got Richard, we've got Stephanie again, I think, and Cathal, Danilo, we've got Anya, we've got Jan, we've got Rob, Master Templar, SCSC, Alex, Thomas, Craig, and Lucy again. Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome to the show. Today I want to talk about Labour's green strategy because not much has been happening with the Tories this weekend. They've had a quiet weekend, which is unusual for the Tories. It's because they've been on half-term holiday because Parliament is a bit like school. It's a bit like Hogwarts. Hogwarts for people who haven't grown up. Yeah, anyway, but they've just been on half-term, so not much to talk about. Although I could say a few things about Nadine Zahawi and his distaste for inheritance tax, but I think I'll make a special little moment of truth about that later today. So what I want to talk about is Labour policy at the moment. When they get elected, touch wood, if they get elected, we'll be looking at them bringing in a new publicly owned clean energy company called Great British Energy. It's going to be publicly owned, and they reckon it's going to save the taxpayer. Well, sorry, not the taxpayer, UK households, same thing really, £93 billion. £93 billion. Because we won't be beholden to the big oil and gas companies who can price gouge, as we saw when the invasion of Ukraine happened, and suddenly they went, ooh, even though the UK only gets 3% of its gas from Russia, we can start charging people like £2 for a litre of diesel. And they'll have no choice but to use diesel or their petrol cars because we've made like the electric ones like prohibitively expensive. So the only way you can afford to have a green energy car is to be really rich in the first place. Anyway, so the idea is that by 2030, we will have 100% green power, which is ambitious, and I like it. I like that kind of ambition. It's the kind of ambition that we need right now. We need to be on a bit of a war footing. Not the best to use when talking about when Labour get into power, but this is a serious matter, a really, really serious matter. This is the future of the habitable zones of the world. We have many big and capital cities that are based on rivers that will flood. And they say, oh, it's only going to be 8 inches. No, that's on average. That's on average. You'll have much higher high tides when you have those really high tides. You know, when the sun, because the sun has an effect on gravity, the sun and the moon combine to give you these really, really high tides. Yeah, then it'll be, it could be a lot more than 8 inches. And unless we want to build ugly concrete walls around every beach in the world, we'll lose every beach in the world pretty much, except some that are on the edge of Lake Titicaca up in the Andes. So big problem. So this is their plan. And as part of their plan, they are quite sensibly not going to allow any more licenses for drilling for oil or gas in the North Sea. This makes sense for a variety of reasons. First of all, it makes economic sense because the fact that we drill out our own oil doesn't mean that necessarily we get to buy that oil at a discounted rate. In fact, we really don't. And because of successive Tory governments and their terrible failure to realise when someone is running rings around them, that being the EU during the negotiations, any trade deal we've got with anyone like Australia, New Zealand, any kind of company, business, corporation that they deal with just runs rings around them and gets them to do things that are on the surface of it insane, like the fact that we give massive subsidies from the taxpayer companies that are posting billions of pounds of profit every few months. Yeah, we're giving them subsidies out of our taxpayers' purse. Money that could be spent on fixing the potholes and, I don't know, building those 40 new hospitals, improving state schools, giving better care for the elderly, giving more childcare for struggling parents. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. No, we're going to give it to literally some foreign billionaires. Okay, great, cool. Yeah, that sounds like a plan, Tories. They're not very clever, you see. They're not very clever. However, the reason why I'm bringing this up today, there is an article on the front page of the Times today which caught my eye. And it's about Gary Smith and Sharon Graham, who are respectively the General Secretary at the GMB Union and Unite the Union. GMB, does anyone know what the B stands for in GMB? Don't look it up. I want in the comments now. I want what does the B stand for? Because it's quite interesting. Anyway, so they have criticised Labour's policy about banning new licenses for oil and gas extraction. There's another reason why this is a good idea as well. Is in the future we will still need oil. There's not going to come a time, I don't think, in human civilization where oil isn't useful in some way or another. I mean, we burn it mostly at the moment, which is the stupidest thing we could do with it. This should be treated as a precious commodity because it is what we make all of our plastics out of. And I don't think you can make a lot of medical instruments without plastic. Also, it's what we make our roads out of. We make a lot more things than you would necessarily think of off the top of your head. I'm a bit worried now because I'm getting an error message up saying that people could be getting some buffering. If I get some buffering, let me know. Ken has got it straight in there. Boilermakers. Oh no, Johnny was in there first. Johnny, Boilermakers. Yeah, it's General Municipal and Boilermakers, and then some other things, but they drop off the other things. Boilermakers. I think actually it's cool. It's like a really cool bit of trivia. Patrick McCarthy also got Boilermakers as well. There are plant-based plastics. Yes, that's Stephanie, but we won't have enough land, I don't think, to grow crops to make those kind of plastics because they tend to be quite lightweight, and those kind of plastics you can't make a road with. Other alternatives for how to make road surfaces, I mean, like you can use concrete, but that's really bad for the environment as well. It's all a bit cobbled streets. That's what we need to go back to. Anyway, listen, Gary Smith and Sharon Graham, these general sex of two of Labour's affiliated union, and I'm not a big fan. Was it Unite? Unite was the big Brexity one, wasn't it? Was that Len McCluskey, Scouse guy? Yeah, who was like, yeah, Brexit. I was like, oh god, no. Anyway, yeah, they've said, look, they call it naive, which is a bit patronising, but whatever. It's naive. That's the word they use, and it would create a cliff edge for the industry. Now, the thing is about this policy is that it says that oil and gas extraction, as is, can stay in place till 2050. So anyone working on oil or gas platforms in the North Sea can continue working for another 25 years, which that's the kind of job security that most of us would dream of having. But yeah, it's still got to be something that's there. And I'm looking at this thinking, well, first of all, look, oil and gas extraction is really bad for the environment. It's not economically, it's not great for the UK. It's not like we make loads and loads of money out of it. We really don't. We're not energy self-sufficient in any way, shape or form. And the amount of money that we have to spend on our own oil and gas is set by the international markets. It's not set by ourselves. Whereas if it was all green, if it was all tidal and nuclear and wind and solar, we can price it whatever we want. We don't have to have it on the international market. It also takes away a lot of power from tin pot dictatorships around the world that prop themselves up through oil revenue, like Angola, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Venezuela. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for getting rid of them as soon as possible. And it's interesting that they went after this and said, "Oh, this is a bad thing." When I don't know what their opinion is about the fact that the Tories have banned onshore wind farms for the best part of 10 years now. So you're not allowed to build any turbines on land in the UK at a time of a great climate emergency. And it just honestly beggars belief that like these people that they sort of look out the window and go, I didn't want to see a wind turbine. I can see wind turbines from where I am in Durham, and they're lovely. They're on the hill and they just majestically swirl in the breeze. I like them. I like them. Patrick H says, my granddad was a boilermaker. Cool. It's a cool profession, isn't it? Boilermaker. Lubricants and hydraulics, essential uses. Recycled glass is being used to make roads. Yeah, Stephanie, but again, like it's quantity, isn't it? The amount of oil we have compared with the amount of recycled gas we have, it's hardly comparable. And think about all the roads in the world. Too much land is used up for growing concrete, says Danilo. That was Mike Graham's contribution to the intellectual vigor of Talk Radio, the right-wing radio station in the UK, and one of them. And basically, sorry, this probably wasn't very nice noise. He said that you can grow concrete. You can't grow concrete. It's nonsense. Morning all, says Lefty Bozer. Morning. Hi, Graham. What are your opinion on Labour banning the mayor, Bristol? That's from Claudia. I think that was in Bristol. In Bristol, I thought that was up in the northeast. I thought that was up near me now. But I don't know enough about it, so I'm not going to comment on it. I will do some research and then I will opine, but I don't know enough about the situation. It's not up to Starmer to end Brexit. That's down to the EU members. It's not complicated. Stop gaslighting everyone. That's all down to the EU. What? Sorry, it's not up to Starmer to end Brexit. That's down to all the EU members. What? I don't really understand that comment, Johnny. Can you could you elaborate? James T. UK oil and gas does make lots of money because it's owned by big corporations, mainly abroad, and we don't tax them, and it makes no difference to the UK. Yeah, James, I know. But I mean, it's not like I don't want to say viable because obviously it is economically viable as a capitalist enterprise. I just mean that it's not great for the country's economy, and I would rather be energy self-sufficient. And also, here's a good point as well. It's really dangerous because later in this article, they talk about the fact that this is going to be like the coal miners. Sharon Graham emphasised the need for a fully funded plan for jobs, which I get. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think there has to be a funded plan for jobs for people who might be losing their jobs because they work in the oil and gas industry. But unlike with coal, so look, I don't want to upset anyone. I don't want people to think, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. But like when it comes down to being a technician, being an engineer, obviously you've got to be a slightly higher level to work on an oil rig or a gas rig, I guess, than if you are a coal miner. Like those skills are adaptable to other sectors. You are an engineer. It's not like you literally just carve out what's in front of you digging all day, which is a difficult career to transfer the skills into another one. And I'm not dissing coal miners because one of the things that winds me up is when very rich people say, I worked hard for my money. And I'm like, no, you didn't. You didn't work as hard as a coal miner. Because honestly, that's probably the hardest work that humans have ever done or ever do. So don't talk to me about how hard your job is, especially if you work in an office. But yeah, the fact remains that the Labour do need a plan for putting people who may lose their jobs. And, they're talking about 45,000 jobs being lost, but then distributing them amongst giving them new jobs. And look, let's talk about things about the oil and gas industry as well. First of all, you get on an oil rig, you're going to be there for a few months. You're away from your family. If you can reskill people so they can work as an engineer locally, they can spend more time with their family. Plus, drilling for oil and gas is insanely dangerous. Insanely dangerous. One of the most dangerous professions on earth is being a scuba diver on an oil rig. It is just off the charts dangerous. There's so many things that can go wrong. So many ways to die. A million ways to die on an oil rig. So, and when you look at renewable energy, solar and wind especially, let's not talk about nuclear for a moment, but when we talk about wind and solar, compared with oil and gas, they are insanely safe. And you don't have the problems like you had where, oil platforms have gone up in flames, like the awful Piper Alpha disaster, which resulted in over 100 deaths, or the Deepwater Horizon spill, which led to the deaths of millions of sea creatures and seabirds and just devastated the coast all around the Gulf of Mexico. These things happen. That's not going to happen with a wind turbine. And apparently, if you paint one of the blades black, it means that birds don't fly into it. In fact, one of the organizations, one of the 139 organizations that is lobbying or supporting Labour's Green Plan for green energy, includes the Royal Society for Protection of Birds. So they're happy. Do you know what kills more birds than wind turbines? Tall glass buildings. It really amuses me when Trump goes, oh, don't build wind turbines because the birds get chopped up by them. It's like, no, mate. Your buildings, mate, kill way more birds. Especially when they kind of reflect the sky and it just... Anyway. Morning all, says someone. Oh, then deleted the... No, he didn't. Guten Morgen, says... We got a little bit sick of defeatists claiming rejoiners are claiming we can just rejoin. Everyone else is aware of reapplying and the task we face. A little sick of defeatists claiming rejoiners are claiming we can just rejoin. Oh, okay, yeah, I get what you mean. Sorry, I thought you meant like we were the defeatists for wanting to rejoin the EU. No, look, I've equated Brexit with prohibition in the States, and I'm going to stick with that, or the Civil War. So we had the Civil War for about 12 years, was it? The Civil War? Someone's going to correct me in the comments, I'm sure. We had prohibition for about 12 years. Correct me in the comments. About that time frame, in which a country did something a bit mad and went, hey, let's try something else. Let's chop off the king's head and see how we do with the parliament instead, in charge of everything. Let's hope that doesn't descend into a dictatorship or nothing. And then in America with prohibition, they're like, oh, let's ban alcohol. Let's actually have a constitutional amendment to ban alcohol. I'm just like, that didn't go so well, did it? No, let's re-legalize alcohol. Let's never talk about this again. I could talk about the war on drugs, but just aside, I think that Brexit's going to be a lot like that. I think it's a 10-year project, and what's going to happen is in this election, Labour are going to try and not mention it. They're going to shut down. And I realised this, and I talked to Phil, and we had a little bit of a debate the other day on the agenda, where I was saying, but I don't understand why they can't just be vague and just say, well, never say never, or something like that. Why do they have to say we'll never rejoin the single market, we'll never rejoin the customs union? And I realise now that they're doing that to shut down the conversation because they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about Brexit at all. And I understand why they're doing that. As infuriating as it is for a diehard rejoiner like myself, I get it. Let's get them in. Let's get them into power. And then in 2029, I think that's going to be the election where we're going to go, oh, we really should do something about this Brexit thing. And I think that the Tories will turn first. You watch it. When the Tories get absolutely decimated. If the Tories get decimated in the next election, if they go down to 150 seats, happened in 1997, they will absolutely crap their pants. They'll put Suella Braverman in charge for a couple of years. They'll do really, really badly. Then they'll get some other wingnut in charge. And then in the run-up to the 2029 election, they'll see that they're still like way behind in the polls. They'll put in a more sensible, moderate leader, and they will probably pivot on Brexit and suddenly say, oh yes, we decided that Brexit was wrong. We didn't want it anyway. It was all Jeremy Corbyn's fault. Mark my words. Someone timestamp this, put it in a time bubble and push it forward to 2029 and open it up again. Pop that bubble and see if I'm right. Labour says all we need to do is harness the heat coming off the angry gammon Graham. Yes. I hope you're not calling me an angry gammon there. There's going to be a complete institutional. There's going to be complete institutional reform in the UK, says Kevin. Yeah. One of the things that Labour have already said they're going to do is that the House of Lords is going to be reformed. That will change everything because it's not just like, oh, let's get rid of the House of Lords. No. They're going to reform it. So what's the most probable thing they're going to do there is have a House of Britain type thing, which was suggested by Will Hutton back in the 90s, where you have different regions of the UK represented equally in the House. And we vote for it. And it's probably going to be PR as well. And so it's going to be set up in a way, I imagine, that England can't foster its opinion on Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. It's going to be a situation where at least 3 of the 4 entities of the United Kingdom agree on something for it to go through. If Scotland gets independence in the next few years, which it looks likely, it will be 2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 agree. Yep, okay, let's go and do it. That's going to be England and Wales, and Northern Ireland's going to be like, no, about everything. Onshore wind and hydrogen power plants, solar down the centre of motorways. In 5 years, the energy will fall off a cliff. See Finland. That's from Richard. Yes, solar panels in car parks. I mean, like seriously, that would be so. You go to the supermarket and you park under a shelter, and the shelter has solar panels on it. Solar panels all over the car parks in the UK. Because they're a waste of space and we shouldn't be driving anyway. But, also that would mean that your car's in the shade. So when you get back to the car, with your supermarket shopping and your frozen ice cream, it doesn't melt the second you put it in your super hot, super heated boot, which is more like an oven. Let's put this food in this oven for the drive home. Flint says, I would never call you a gammon, Graham. I think of you more as cheese and onion flavour. Ooh. Thanks very much, Flint, I think. I reckon 2030-ish is the first time rejoin will become a general possibility. Yeah, I think that the next election in 2029 or 2028, 2029, I think that Brexit will re-emerge as a serious issue there. And don't forget, there's a lot of renegotiations that have got to go on. Like the renegotiation about our fishing rights comes up in them. I think 2026. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. And that's going to have to be looked at. So yeah. Anyway, just to go back onto this whole thing about this criticism coming from the GMB and Unite, I kind of get what they're saying. I think that the Times, obviously, it's a Murdoch rag. They kind of over blew it a little bit because they're saying it makes it sound in the headline that these unions are opposed to a key Labour policy. They're not. If you read down into the comments, the things that people have actually said in the article, they do say that they want, as part of this, a costed plan for rejobbing. Rejobbing, is that a thing? I don't know. Re-employing people, reskilling, whatever needs to be done from working on the oil and gas platforms. But I would like to see all oil and gas platforms shut down by 2030. And it's not even going to happen until 2050 under Labour's policy, but I actually think it should be quicker than that. And do you know what will make it quicker than that? If oil and gas just becomes absolutely unviable as a means of creating energy, because it's just so stupidly expensive compared with the stuff that is on our doorstep that doesn't need to be refined, that doesn't need to be transported, doesn't need to be pumped out the ground at great cost, that doesn't need to be traded on an international market, and that has to be bought in US dollars. That's right. If we buy oil from the Norwegians, we have to pay for it in US dollars. Yeah, what a great system. And a system that doesn't prop up foreign dictatorships. The move to green power by 2030, entirely green power by 2030, it makes economic sense. Just leave aside the environmental and the sociological and all that kind of effect, but just look at the economics of this. Producing electricity through solar and wind is so much cheaper and less likely to be affected by fluctuations in cost than oil and gas. It is. It just is. And this government has been absolutely dreadful in helping people invest in electric vehicles, helping people invest in getting electric heat pumps, helping people invest in getting solar panels on the roofs of their houses, helping people invest in getting even insulation, cheap insulation. Most houses you could insulate with some top-up insulation for maybe 200 quid. 200 quid. Honestly, for the amount of savings that we would make as a country in our energy bills, that's off the charts for value for money. But one thing that Tories don't understand is the value of anything. They don't understand the price of anything either. They're not cynics. They just don't understand stuff. They're really thick. And I think that this is one of the biggest problems that we've got to try and get people to get their head around this idea that just because someone sounds posh doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. And just because someone doesn't sound posh doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, I often get told I don't know what I'm talking about, but, I do sound scouse, so I get why people are saying that, but I do also feel like we need to change our perspective on that. I think that we should start looking at posh voices in the same way that you might hear a very southern drawl from America. You might think, oh, this person probably didn't go to school, or if they did, they probably didn't pay attention. One day, my friends, one day. Brentry, Breturn, Brejoin, Brack again, back in again, Bretta go back, says Adam's Army. Stephanie says, is it the Orkneys or the Hebrides that went green a couple of decades ago and now exporting electricity? That wouldn't supply. That wouldn't surprise me. Saudi's plan wasn't Vision 2050, it was Vision 2030. Saudi saying that it's going to move away from gas and oil is a bit. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Kind of need oil for aeroplanes. That's the main name. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Like what I was saying before about we'll still need oil in the future. If we've got rid of all the easy to reach oil, that all went by about, I think, the end of the 70s. Now all the stuff that's left is quite hard to reach. So, yeah, I'm a big supporter of leaving it in the ground for future generations to use for things that we can't use synthesized oil or plant oil for. and just using like 1% of what we use these days, like literally just the absolute bare minimum when we have no other choice than to use this disgusting black sludgy stuff or gas which is explosive, pulling it out of the ground and transporting it halfway around the world, then refining it, and then I was looking out over the Mersey the other week, last weekend, and this weekend, God, yeah, I was there, and the if you go down to Otterspool, there's a bit where it goes, this grass slope going down to the River Mersey, and you can look across the Mersey to the other side, and you see Ellesmere Port, where there's a massive oil refinery, and there's one of those really tall chimneys, and at the top there's a flame, like at the beginning of Blade Runner, and it's just there, it's just burning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I think that oil refinery's been there my whole life, so at least 44 years. Someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Feel free to Google stuff. Flint, £5 super chat. Thank you so much, Flint. As a carrot cruncher from darkest Somerset, I sympathise, but we are educated, top of the line models, Graham. I know. Well, this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to stop thinking of someone with a plummy voice as being intelligent. We need to stop doing that. And I don't know how. I think that when I was growing up in the 80s, we did have that kind of attitude towards people who were very posh. We had the sort of like, aren't they quaint and hilarious and probably broke now because they can't afford to maintain the family stately home. Ha ha ha. They were kind of like an object of ridicule. And now they're taken seriously. There are people out there who actually take Jacob Rees-Mogg seriously. That's terrifying. My master's project was looking into producing kerosene from like fuel from algae cultivated in wastewater. Much more work to do, but there are alternatives to fossil fuel for aviation. Yeah, I just don't think it's in place yet. So more research would be fantastic. And research is a big thing. I mean, one of the things that the Tories have done really, really well, and one of the few things they've done very, very well is destroying research in this country. Not just by pulling us out of the Horizon project, which shared information and research projects across Europe, but also by making people less likely to start any research things in the UK because it's harder to import labor, not labor, but research and things like that it is if you just want to move people around the EU, which is dead easy now for the UK. You need a work permit, you need a work visa, and all that kind of stuff. So the Tories have done one thing. I mean, it's a bad thing, it's an awful thing, but the amount of money they give to oil companies each year, if they gave that to research and development into alternatives, like what James is talking about there, that would be fantastic. Tim Nicebut Dim, all gammons. Yes! Maybe that was it. Maybe it was just growing up with Harry Enfield being like taking the mick out of these people. Especially loads of money. Loads of money just really, really took the Michael out of that sort of working class, I've done well in the 80s, is all my money, kind of just louse type of person. And now those loads of money people are all like the sort of the older generation who have got all the wealth in this country locked in. Well, not all of it, just 90% of the wealth of this country is held by the baby boomers. The problem is we have knowledge to make synthetic fuels, but we don't have the tech to produce it in the necessary amount. That might be true. Loads of money equals The Apprentice. Oh my God. My partner watches The Apprentice, so I sometimes see a few episodes, and I just hate everyone on it. Like every single person on The Apprentice. If it was like The Running Man, I wouldn't have a major objection. Sorry, I don't know if I'm going to get away with that. Will that slip under the? Will that reference slip under the Google algorithm? Or will I get defunded now? What are you saying, Graham? You can't say that. It's so naughty. Anyway, so so it's 1 minute past 10. So I'm going to wrap up in a moment. So thank you very much for all of your wonderful chat and super chats. That's been great. Rees-Mogg belongs in a cabinet in a museum, not a government. The Economist, indeed. It belongs in a museum. So do you. Right, I finished my cup. I finished my cup of tea. It was a bit lukewarm at the end there. Not great. Our local parish council recently went 19 to 20 seats Lib Dems. That's fantastic. I mean, I as opposed to the Tories, I guess. They're already using some biofuel in aircraft. I know what you mean. It's miserable having to choose between blue and orange. R1s seem okay though. Hey. I see. Yeah, okay. Lib Dems. Synthetic fuel is not a solution to the problem because you still have to burn it, releasing carbon into the atmosphere. That's from Flint. Yeah, I mean, the more research we do into renewables, especially with flight, because that's a big thing, but also we need to rethink how we operate our entire transport industry. And I know that I bring this up a lot, but I've been to every country in the world without flying. And you can do it. You can get anywhere in the world on trains, buses, boats. You can do it. However, it takes a lot longer. And generally speaking, if you're traveling as a family, it's more expensive to do it that way. A few years ago, we wanted to go, the four of us wanted to go to Italy, and we were booking trains down to Italy. So we had to get a train from Durham down to London, and then from London to Paris, and then Paris down to Milan, I think, and then from Milan to Rome. Yeah, just the cost of those train tickets cost 4 times as much as just flying to Rome. So while that is still the case, we are going to be having planes going everywhere. We have thousands of planes landing every day in the UK and taking off every day. There's like a bunch of planes that take off with nobody on them. Nobody on these planes. There's one that I think that goes from Heathrow to Cardiff, maybe. Like every day, this plane flies to Cardiff and back and doesn't have anyone on board. And the only reason it does it is so it can keep its slot in Heathrow Airport, because it has a particular plumb slot of when it's allowed to land, and they don't want to lose that. So it's actually more cost effective for them, not for the planet though, because you're literally flying a plane up into the atmosphere. Well, not the atmosphere, but up into the air, 28,000 feet up into the air, and then you're pumping carbon dioxide directly into the atmosphere, where it's not going to get captured by a clever carbon capture thing that you've invented and put in your back garden, because it's 28,000 bloody feet in the air, mate. So yeah, problem. Where green falls flat on its face, the simple fact that nothing involved in it can be manufactured without the use of fossil fuels, negating the argument on carbon footprint. Yeah, but carbon footprint, the whole idea of the carbon footprint was invented by the fossil fuel industry as a part of their greenwashing strategy to make you feel guilty about living your life, when actually nearly all of the world's carbon emissions come as a result of about 72 companies that produce the vast majority of the carbon that is now in our atmosphere. So yeah, it's just to say, oh well, you got to use carbon in order to make the stuff in the first place. If we get to a point where we don't have to use the carbon to make this stuff, then quids in. But yeah, the amount of carbon that you need to make a electric car, say, is comparable to the amount of carbon that you need to make an internal combustion engine car. But once the electric car is on the road, then you're not pumping out CO2 out of its exhaust every single day that you use that car, unlike with a petrol car. And also, it's not just the CO2 that your car is pumping out, it's the CO2 that the tanker that brings the petrol to the petrol station that you put in your car, or the diesel, that's also going into the atmosphere as well. And then you've got the actual process of refining the oil, which just uses shitloads of energy and obviously produces a lot of CO2, oil refinery. And then you've got the process of getting, transporting the stuff to the oil refinery, which is usually done on tankers, which are one of the most filthiest ways of transporting stuff around the world. In terms of tonnage, obviously, you are using a lot less. If you think about a container ship these days can take like 20,000 TEU, 20-foot equivalent units, which are your standard size for a container. So if you think about these, each one is taking 20,000 lorries off the road. Obviously, you would use a lot more energy, CO2, burn a lot more CO2, put a lot more CO2 in the atmosphere with 20,000 lorries. But the actual fuel that they use on these ships is the filthiest fuel they can get. They actually spin it. They create their own fuel on board these ships. And also, no matter what speed the ship is going, it always uses the same amount of fuel, because they just tilt the propeller. This is really boring, technical, but they tilt the propeller depending on whether they want to go, dead slow, half speed, full speed, full steam ahead. Yeah, they use the same amount of power, use the same amount of oil, filthy oil that they have. It's not distillated, is it? Distillated or something. They basically get the filthiest oil they can get their hands on. It's the cheapest. They get like crude oil, and then they actually refine it on board the ship. And I think they anything that's sort of left over, they kind of maybe dump at sea, because the international rules about dumping oil at sea or dumping anything at sea run out something like X many miles away from any given coastline. So if you're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean or the middle of the Pacific, it's just pull the lever, all the trash goes overboard, all the oil into the sea. Great. They'll be gone unless in alignment. I think it's 6 months notice to leave CPTPP. There's a lot of work and negotiation required, but no time like now to start planning. Yeah, I mean, we can pull out of any deal that we've gone into, because no government by law can tie the hands of future governments. So if there was a deal that the Tories put in that we couldn't get out of in a future Labour government, then that would be against British law, and they shouldn't have signed that deal, and therefore we'll get out of it. Yeah, so their plan, obviously the Tories want it so that they lock in Brexit, and one of the reasons for joining the Pacific Partnership, which is worth not even a pan of scouse for us as Britain, our economy. I mean, you know, the 0.08% over 10 years is like a statistic. It's within the a marginal error for statistics. It might well be zero. It might actually just cost us money, but they think it's worth it because it locks us out of the EU. But it doesn't. The big tanker diesel engine run on bitumen, essentially tar. That's from Andreas Wolf. Yeah. So I'm saying, like, it's like the filthiest way of getting energy. You couldn't, if you tried to imagine a more filthy, dirty, polluting, toxic way of getting energy from one place to another, and then getting it into your car or getting it to heat your house, the oil industry is just off the charts. It is absolutely off the charts. As anyone who lives in the Niger Delta, in Port Harcourt, in Nigeria, can attest, because their entire life has been turned upside down by the fact that oil companies have come in and they have hundreds of leaks in their pipelines every day, and they don't get fixed, or they do get fixed, or some people drill into the oil pipes to get some oil out of it and that doesn't get fixed. Honestly, it is a nightmare, and now the Niger Delta is basically dead. Yeah, the oil companies did that. Anyway, I've been jabbering on for 10 minutes longer than I should have done. Thank you very, very much for watching. I will be back tomorrow morning. No, Phil Morehouse will be back tomorrow morning at 10:30 for another morning brew. In the meantime, I'll try and get up another couple of videos for you to watch on the channel. If you want to support this channel further, if you go over to the Patreon page, it's patreon.com/Labour Social, and you can patronize us all you like. Which will be awesome. So thank you very much for watching. I'll be in the chat tomorrow with you all watching Phil. So until then, I'll say thanks for watching, and hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.